Imagine for a second that you're filling out a ballot. You skip past the usual names, the local politicians, the familiar incumbents.
Right, the names you see every election cycle.
Exactly. But instead of checking a box for a person, you check a box to give a seat in Parliament to a machine.
A literal artificial intelligence algorithm.
Yeah, an AI algorithm.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds completely wild, like a rejected script for some sci-fi movie.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds totally dystopian.
But we found this staggering statistic while going through the research for this topic. When asked, a 2020 survey by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation found that 51% of Europeans surveyed supported reducing the number of human parliamentarians and replacing them with an AI algorithm.
Which, I mean, that really stops you in your tracks. Over half.
Over half of the people.
We are so used to complaining about politicians, right? But actively wanting to hand the reins of government over to a machine, that is a massive societal shift.
Yeah, it really is.
What's fascinating here is how quickly we are moving from AI as a theoretical computer science concept to AI as an active, consequential participant in our civic lives. We aren't just talking about hypothetical futures anymore. The infrastructure of what researchers are calling algorithmic rule it's already being laid down right now.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive is to explore the reality of that algorithmic rule. Should AI be allowed to make government decisions?
Right, that's the big question.
We're going to weigh the massive efficiency gains of AI against some, honestly, truly terrifying systemic pitfalls. And most importantly, we're going to figure out what this means for your daily life as a citizen.
Because it affects all of us.
Exactly. And to get to the bottom of this, we've synthesized a massive stack of incredible sources for you. We're looking at academic journals like Econ Journals and BIJMRD, an Ash Center panel on politics, a fascinating book called Algorithmic Rule by a Swedish progressive foundation, plus guidelines for the EU Commission, and industry insights from Granicus.
And before we dive into the dangers, which there are many, we really need to understand the appeal.
Yeah, why do 51% of people want this?
Exactly. Why would over half of the people in that survey want a computer making the rules? It fundamentally comes down to two major structural problems that modern governments face right now: complexity and efficiency.
Let's start with complexity, because the world isn't moving at a linear pace anymore.
Yeah.
We're dealing with global, highly interconnected challenges that just seem to escalate overnight.
That's the key issue. Human cognition naturally struggles to comprehend exponential threats.
Like COVID-19, right?
Yes, perfectly said. We saw this so clearly with the spread of COVID-19. It is incredibly difficult for the human mind to fully grasp how quickly a virus can multiply, or to anticipate all the cascading secondary effects of shutting down a global supply chain.
Right, it's just too much data for one brain.
The math just outstrips our biological processing power.
And climate change feels like the ultimate example of that, too. I mean, trying to predict global weather patterns while factoring in economics and agriculture and ocean currents.
Precisely. And that's exactly why the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has relied on complex computational simulations for 20 years.
Wow, 20 years.
Yeah. To forecast climate scenarios, you have to run multivariable simulations that process billions of data points simultaneously. AI acts as a sort of expansion of our minds in these scenarios.
Like a cognitive upgrade.
Right. It helps us model a multitude of futures so policymakers can actually see the long-term consequences of a choice they make today.
But it's not just about these massive, world-ending scenarios, is it? When I look at the research, a huge driver for AI adoption is just dealing with the sheer crushing weight of day-to-day bureaucracy.
Oh, absolutely. The administrative burden is huge.
Because government departments are famously siloed. You have the health department, the labor department, housing, education. And historically, their computer systems do not talk to each other.
They operate like people holding different pieces of a puzzle, but completely refusing to sit at the same table.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating for citizens. But in AI, according to the sources, it can ingest all those distinct data sets and find correlations that a human bureaucrat who's just looking at one single spreadsheet would completely miss.
And it does all of this without experiencing cognitive fatigue. That's a huge point.
Right, no burnout.
AI can handle repetitive, rule-based tasks 24 hours a day without needing a coffee break or going on vacation. By automating the data entry, the initial screenings for benefits, or routing citizen forms, governments can drastically reduce their operational costs.
Which taxpayers love.
Exactly. And in theory, this frees up human civil servants to step away from the tedious paperwork and focus on what humans do best, which is complex, nuanced, and empathetic interactions with the public.
I mean, I get the appeal. It sounds like the ultimate bureaucratic intern, right?
The perfect employee.
It never sleeps, it reads millions of pages a second, and it never complains about the workload.
But hold on. Using the Granicus source here, if we're talking about processing sensitive citizen data like tax returns, health records, welfare applications, we aren't just talking about letting ChatGPT run the DMV.
No, not at all. And that is a crucial distinction made in the industry data we reviewed. There's a vast architectural difference between a general-purpose AI and what the industry calls government-ready AI.
Government-ready AI.
Yes, general-purpose models, they're built to be creative and flexible.
Mm-hmm.
But government-ready systems have to be rigidly integrated with highly secure, compliant digital platforms.
So they have a totally different standard.
Exactly. They have to adhere to strict public records retention policies and very rigid accessibility standards.
Because the stakes are so much higher. I mean, if a commercial AI recommends the wrong pair of shoes to me, it's an annoyance. But if government AI denies your housing application based on some flawed calculation, you could end up on the street.
Which brings us to the dark side of this technology.
Right. Because when that tireless, highly integrated intern starts making decisions about your life that you can't understand and that you can't appeal, we slide into a scenario researchers call algocracy.
Algocracy, basically rule by algorithm.
Exactly. It describes a society where opaque, automated systems wield immense power over people's lives, but without the transparency or the recourse that we demand in a normal democratic society. And the most immediate danger in an algocracy is bias.
I hear that term thrown around a lot, AI bias.
Yeah.
But I think there's a disconnect for a lot of people, myself included.
How so?
Well, if an algorithm is just looking at ones and zeros, how does it learn to discriminate? I always thought the whole point of using a machine was that it didn't have prejudices.
It doesn't have prejudice in an emotional sense, right? But machine learning is fundamentally a pattern recognition engine, and it learns those patterns from historical data.
Okay.
If that historical data contains societal inequities like systemic racism or socioeconomic bias, the AI just absorbs it as fact.
Just bakes it right in.
Yeah. And what's really insidious is how it uses proxy variables.
Proxy variable.
Yeah, so even if you hide a person's race or gender from the algorithm, the AI will just look at their zip code or their income level or their education history. Because those factors historically correlate with race or class due to past discriminatory policies, the AI just uses them as a proxy.
Wow, so it ends up hard-coding historical prejudice into the fabric of future public decision-making.
Exactly, and it does it often under the guise of mathematical objectivity.
So it's essentially laundering human prejudice through complex math. This isn't just theoretical. The sources detailed some devastating real-world examples, like the situation in Gothenburg, Sweden from the algorithmic rulebook. They implemented a system to handle school placements.
Right, the school assignment algorithm.
Yeah, and because of a miscoded algorithm, it resulted in massive distress for families. The system just arbitrarily placed children in schools far away from their homes, completely ignoring siblings or safe travel routes, all because the code was rigid and flawed.
And it gets worse when financial penalties are involved. Look at the Dutch childcare benefit scandal.
Oh, that one was incredibly dark.
It was. A self-learning algorithm was implemented to detect welfare fraud. But because of how it was trained, it ended up falsely flagging tens of thousands of families for fraud. And it was often based on discriminatory markers, like simply having dual nationality.
And the financial penalties ruined lives. Parents lost their homes, and thousands of children were placed into foster care because of the financial distress the government caused based on a computer glitch.
It's horrific. Or consider Australia's robo-debt system. That is a textbook example of automated systems reversing the burden of proof.
Explain how that one worked mechanically.
So the system used an algorithm to calculate welfare overpayments, but the math was fundamentally flawed. It took a person's annual income from the tax office and simply divided it by 26 to get a fortnightly average.
But people working hourly or seasonal jobs, they don't earn the same amount every 2 weeks.
Exactly. But when the AI's crude average didn't match what the citizen had reported, it automatically assumed the citizen was lying and issued massive unlawful debt notices.
So it pushed the entire burden onto the citizen to prove the computer wrong. The human cost there was just catastrophic.
Hmm.
So what does this all mean? What connects these tragedies?
It's a technical hurdle known as the black box problem.
Right. And what does that actually look like in practice? Is it just code that's, I don't know, too long for a human to read? Or is the computer fundamentally doing something we can't translate?
It's the latter. See, traditional software is like baking a cake with a strict recipe. If you follow the steps, if this happens, then do that. You can trace exactly how the cake was made.
Very linear.
Exactly. Machine learning, specifically deep neural networks, doesn't work like that at all.
Yeah.
You give the system millions of data points and essentially tell it to figure out the connections on its own. It builds this massive dynamic web of mathematical weights that adjust themselves over and over. When it finally spits out a decision, even the programmers who designed it can't always trace the specific pathway it took.
So the AI literally cannot explain how it arrived at its conclusion.
They can't.
So wait, what does this all mean for accountability? Because if a human bureaucrat denies your welfare benefits unfairly, you have options.
Right. You can demand an explanation.
You can file an appeal, you can organize to vote their boss out of office. But if an opaque black box AI denies your welfare, who do you hold accountable?
That is the million-dollar question.
Do you sue the developer who wrote the code? Do you sue the agency that bought it? Or do you sue the algorithm itself?
That is exactly the accountability gap. Traditional public administration relies on very clear chains of command and responsibility. When you introduce an autonomous black box, responsibility is diffused so widely that it just evaporates.
The tech companies always defend this, right? They always say, don't worry, there's a human in the loop.
Yes, the classic defense.
They claim the AI is just making a recommendation, and a human official is sitting there to double-check the work and catch the mistakes. Doesn't that solve the accountability problem?
It sounds great in a press release, but in reality, that safety net is dangerously flawed. And it's due to human psychology.
How so?
It comes down to a phenomenon called automation bias. This is the natural tendency for human beings to cognitively offload their decision-making to a machine.
Oh, like trusting your calculator without thinking about it.
Exactly. If you are a severely overworked civil servant and a highly sophisticated computer system confidently tells you someone is a high risk for fraud, your brain naturally wants to conserve energy.
Right.
The human instinct is to assume the machine is smarter, it processes more data than you ever could, and so you just rubber stamp the decision.
It's just the path of least resistance. But wait, there was a fascinating study in the research about something called selective adherence. It turns out human officials didn't always blindly trust the AI, did they?
No, they didn't. And honestly, the research showed a much darker interaction. In some studies, officials only accepted the AI's recommendation when it aligned with their own pre-existing human stereotypes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If the AI confirmed their bias, say, flagging a minority applicant as high risk, they used the computer as an objective justification. Hey, the math said so. But if the AI challenged their bias, they just ignored the machine entirely.
So it just becomes a high-tech confirmation bias machine.
Exactly.
And that leads directly to a concept from the sources called moral buffering. This is when public officials basically use the AI as a shield to hide from the moral weight of their jobs.
It's a huge problem.
They deny someone housing or they send them to jail and they say, hey, don't blame me. The computer calculated the risk score. I just followed the protocol.
Right. It allows public servants to completely abdicate their moral duty to the public. They treat an algorithmic output, which, let's remember, is just a probabilistic guess, as an infallible mandate.
I think of it like a driver blindly following their GPS right into a lake. At a certain point, the driver has to look out the window and use their own judgment, right?
You'd hope so.
Especially in sensitive areas like social services or criminal justice. The algorithmic rulebook really hits on this, relying entirely on AI strips away human dignity because you cannot code empathy.
No, you can't. And to combat this, researchers are heavily pushing for explainable AI, or XAI.
What does that entail?
Well, the EU guidelines for trustworthy AI explicitly demand a feature called auditability. This means the technical architecture must allow independent internal and external auditors to assess the algorithms and the data at any time.
Ah, so taking the lid off the black box.
Right. If an AI system cannot explain its reasoning in a way that a human auditor can logically follow, the consensus is building that it simply shouldn't be used in high-stakes public decisions.
That makes total sense. Now, we've been focusing heavily on unelected bureaucrats using these tools. But the research from the Ash Center panel points out that politicians themselves are using AI to get elected. And that is reshaping the very foundations of democracy.
The political arena is undergoing a massive structural transformation right now. Early on, the fears about AI in politics were mostly centered around deepfakes.
Right, generating fake audio or video to scandalize an opponent.
Exactly. And while that's a very real threat, the deeper impact is how AI is fundamentally reshaping campaign operations behind the scenes.
Right, they mentioned tools like Quiller and Legislate and Donner Atlas.
Yeah, these tools are already being deployed to automate the drafting of legislation, to manage massive voter databases, and even to identify the exact psychological moment to ask a specific donor for money.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about the data aspect of those campaigns, specifically micro-targeting. How does that actually work mechanically to manipulate a voter?
Well, think about all the data your phone and your browser collect on you every single day. It's a lot.
It is. Your location, your reading habits, your purchase history. An AI can ingest that data and identify your specific psychological triggers.
Wow.
It learns what makes you anxious, what makes you hopeful, what makes you angry. Campaigns can then use generative AI to instantly build thousands of different political ads tailored specifically to the psychological profile of individual voters and deliver them seamlessly right to their feeds.
The implication of that for a shared reality is terrifying. I mean, it's the equivalent of a politician cloning themselves, knocking on every single door in the country simultaneously, and whispering a completely different, custom-tailored promise into every single voter's ear.
It's a great analogy.
Because if my feed tells me the candidate is a staunch environmentalist and your feed tells you the exact same candidate is a champion of the fossil fuel industry, how can a democracy even function?
It breaks down.
The electorate isn't even participating in the same political reality anymore. We can't debate the issues because we aren't seeing the same issues. This raises an important question about fairness and power dynamics in politics. The research points out that AI gives an overwhelming, almost insurmountable advantage to political actors who have access to massive data sets and the money to deploy advanced computing power.
Right, it's not cheap.
No, it heavily exacerbates existing power imbalances, making it nearly impossible for grassroots or underfunded candidates to compete on an even playing field.
And zooming out to the truly global existential level, there is a chilling concept from the historian Yuval Noah Harari that was referenced in the sources. He suggests that the historical conflict between democracy and dictatorship is, at its core, simply a conflict between two different data processing systems.
It's a really brilliant way to conceptualize governance. Because democracies process data through distributed networks.
Meaning what exactly?
You have millions of voters, independent local courts, state legislatures, a free press, all processing information and making decisions in decentralized hubs.
Okay, I see.
Dictatorships, on the other hand, process data centrally. All information flows to one central authority. Harari warns that the rise of AI might swing the historical advantage toward dictatorships.
Because AI inherently thrives on centralized processing.
Exactly.
To train a massive model, you need an enormous centralized pool of data. So the technology naturally rewards the concentration of information and power, which is the exact opposite of how a healthy democracy is supposed to function.
That's it, exactly. If the technology heavily favors centralization, autocracies could become vastly more efficient at governing and controlling their populations than distributed democracies.
Man. So if the threats to our individual rights, our welfare systems, and our macro-political systems are this severe, how do we fight back? How do we build guardrails to protect citizens without losing the legitimate benefits of efficiency we talked about earlier?
Well, the first major hurdle regulators face is what's known as the pacing problem.
The pacing problem.
Yeah, law is notoriously slow, deliberative, and reactive. But technology moves at lightning speed. By the time a legislature holds hearings, debates a bill, and finally passes a law to regulate a specific AI model, the tech industry has already released a new version that is exponentially more powerful.
Right. Trying to regulate AI is like trying to hit a moving target in the dark.
Precisely.
But the European Union is actually taking a massive swing at it with the European Artificial Intelligence Act. And rather than trying to regulate the specific technology itself, they are categorizing AI systems strictly by risk.
It's a very smart tiered approach. If an AI application poses an unacceptable risk, for example, a government-run social scoring system, or real-time biometric surveillance in public spaces, it is outright banned.
Just illegal, full stop.
Right. Then you have high-risk applications, which include things like credit scoring, employment sorting, or the administration of justice. These face strict regulatory hurdles.
So they require rigorous security testing, mandatory human oversight, and continuous conformity assessments.
Exactly. While minimal risk applications are left largely unregulated to ensure innovation isn't totally stifled.
Now, one of the most controversial features of the EU AI Act is its extraterritorial reach. Much like their data privacy laws, if an AI system is interacting with EU citizens or impacting the EU market, it has to comply with these rules, regardless of whether the developer is sitting in Silicon Valley or Tokyo.
Yeah, the scope is massive.
But realistically, how enforceable is that? I mean, can one region really dictate the rules for a borderless digital technology?
It's an immense challenge, for sure, but it relies on what economists call the Brussels effect.
The Brussels effect.
Yeah, because the European market is so unbelievably large and lucrative, international tech companies are virtually forced to comply if they want access to those consumers. And because it is incredibly expensive and inefficient for a company to build two entirely separate versions of their software, one for Europe and one for the rest of the world, they often just adopt the stricter European rules as their global baseline.
So the EU effectively exports its regulations globally through sheer market power.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. But beyond just top-down, heavy-handed regulation, there is a grassroots perspective from the Swedish algorithmic rulebook we reviewed that I find incredibly compelling. They are pushing a concept called public money, public code.
It's a brilliant principle for democratic transparency. The core argument is very simple. If taxpayer dollars are used to pay for the development or procurement of an algorithm used by the government, then the underlying code should be open source and transparent to the public by default.
I love that because if an algorithm is deciding who gets public housing or who gets audited, the public should be able to look under the hood and see exactly how that math works. You cannot have secret laws in a democracy, so why should we accept secret algorithms making legal determinations?
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, ethical AI isn't just an annoying regulatory hurdle for tech companies to clear. It is the ultimate currency of trust.
Trust?
Yeah. The historical data is clear. If citizens do not trust the government systems, if they feel they're subjected to algorithms that are biased, opaque, or unfair, the legitimacy of the entire public sector collapses. Trust takes decades to build, and it only takes one automated scandal to destroy.
Which brings us right back to you listening to this. This isn't some distant debate for computer scientists in a lab. It is happening right now. The timing of the next traffic light you sit at, the likelihood of facing a tax audit this year, the specific political ads being pushed to your phone ahead of the next local election, these are already being shaped in real time by automated systems.
It's true. We are already living in the early days of algorithmic rule.
We are.
And our role as citizens is to recognize that shift. We have to demand that these systems serve the public good with transparency, auditable fairness, and meaningful human oversight firmly in place.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. It circles back to where we started that survey, where 51% of people wanted to replace politicians with AI.
Right, the 51%.
We spent this entire time unpacking the dangers of algorithms. We know they can launder bias, they can operate as an unaccountable black box, and they completely lack human empathy. But let's be totally honest with ourselves for a second. Human politicians are incredibly flawed.
Very true.
They are famously biased, they operate in back rooms, they are swayed by money, and frankly, they sometimes lack empathy too.
That is the uncomfortable truth at the absolute center of this debate.
So imagine a future where the technology matures.
Yeah.
If, one day, an AI system is rigorously audited and statistically proven to be more fair, more objective, more ethical, and vastly more effective at governing than any human being we could elect. Would it actually be immoral not to let it rule? Think about it. Until next time.